add my Twitter handle here if you have additional questions. So Demian Borba. Uh, Feel free to ping me on Twitter. Not only me, but the whole Adobe XD team is really active on Twitter, Instagram, and all that. So if you have questions, feedback, uh, positive and constructive, feel free to share that. And if you use hashtag Adobe XD, the entire XD team can see it, and chances are someone will reply in less than an hour. So it's really there since the very beginning. Uh, my plan here is to show you XD in a way that it's pretty much the same demo that I do with customers, and then I can share the files with Max, and he can give it to you, and you can do the same if you want, and you can update your name here and go from there. So just to give you an overview, XD is a brand new tool from Adobe. We're working on it for the last 4 years. It started as a startup inside Adobe with 4 people, and then it grew. Now the team, if you combine everyone involved in XD, has over 500 people all over the world. So it's a huge deal for Adobe, and it's being validated and improved every month. So we have monthly releases. Every month there's a new set of functionality being released, and we're always super connected to with the community, and as I said, validating every step of the way. Um, all right, so let me show you the beginning here. So this is XD. You can install XD using the Creative Cloud app, and it's here. Uh, One thing that's very interesting, XD has a free version, so you don't have to have a paid version to use XD. And the limitation on the free version is very, very small. You can do pretty much everything. I would say 95% of things you can do with XD, the paid version. And the only limitation is that you can only create one link for review and one link for development. So yes, you have access to all the functionality, but on the paid version, you can create multiple links for review and multiple links for development. So if you still have access to it, it's just one instead of many. All right, so let me go here and I'll start presenting. So here I have an artboard in XD. I'll zoom out so you can see I have a lot of elements here, and this is my demo file. Different than any other design app out there, XD is extremely fast. So I don't know if it's coming across well, but here you can zoom in and out. You can have thousands of artboards and things just work. It's super fast since day one, and we treat performance as a feature, and we try to preserve that as much as possible. XD is there initially for the UX, UI designer who wants to do wireframes, like high fidelity designs, quickly build prototypes, rich prototypes, then present. For example, here I'm presenting. Collaborate. You can collaborate with more people on like you can create a cloud file for XD, and then you can invite people to the same cloud file and work there. Design systems is this concept of, I don't know if you guys are aware of like the old style guide where you have like some brand guidelines and all that. So now with digital apps, digital websites and apps, you can create systems to avoid designers to like recreate every piece, redesign every piece, and you can move a lot faster once all the components, all the colors, all the character styles are in one place. So that's a system for design, for scaling design, and that's very popular nowadays. It's called design systems. And then production is when you have to export assets from XD, let's say a set of icons or a set of screens to start developing, and you go from there. So the XD is there initially for the designer, but more and more you see designers working with stakeholders for reviews. You see designers working with developers when it's time to prototype, to convert a prototype into code, and go from there. The way I see XD is really a platform for you to design and prototype engaging user experiences. So instead of, for example, spending a lot of time coding something and publishing something and then validate something, you can create a very cheap prototype, very quick prototype based on your designs, test it out, polish, iterate. Once it's all there, then you can hand it off to developers at the end of the process. Any questions so far? see here if I see you guys.
Nope, there's none. I'll tell you if there are. I'll just so you don't switch
Perfect.
screens.
Yeah, feel free to interrupt me at any time. This is really for you guys. All right, a little bit on the journey of XD. We started, as I said, 4 years ago. We had an alpha version, then it became a beta product, but all the beta features that we had, they were at a very high level of fidelity and stability. So yes, it was beta, but it was everything that was there was really polished. And then in 2016, we released XD. It was preview first and then beta. I think I hear my voice again. Like there's a little echo. That's fine. And then uh, since then, now with the public version, with the final version, we have now we're in version 22. That was our August release, and you can see that here, uh, version 22. And since then, every month there's a new update. But like I said in the beginning, every time we do something, we work with the community, we test with users, we test with uh, people that would be playing with the platform, and we validate every single feature before we get there. Uh, XD, with the way we present it, is always talking about removing friction from the design process, design and prototyping process. So we have this saying, design at the speed of thought, that it guides us. Like we need to not only make things faster, but sometimes we remove entire steps of the process to make you guys go faster. Then collaboration, it's not just one designer, it's a designer with another designer or multiple designers working with stakeholders and developers. And once it's time to scale your design, let's say the company is getting bigger and you have to scale the way design is done, then you can create design systems to get there. Talking about design at the speed of thought, again, we're removing friction from every step. Um, we're trying to minimize the information that's presented to you. So different than Photoshop and Illustrator, everything in XD is contextual. So instead of having many panels, lots of panels, you just select an element and the properties inspector on the right changes to reflect the properties of that selection. We also reimagined how you design. So a lot of the repetitive steps, for example, to repeat elements, you can do that visually in XD, and I'll show you that. And we're always evolving, we're always iterating to deliver more and more value. XD has three main modes. The first mode is design mode, where you can do wireframes, you can do high fidelity designs. Then you can use plugins to speed up your process. I'll show you that. And these are some of the features that we have. We know that some people use Sketch, Photoshop, and even Illustrator. So it's very easy to bring these files from other tools and open them in XD. We're always improving that functionality. We're always improving the vector work. XD is a vector-based tool, so you can draw vectors and export vectors from it. We have functionalities that are very smart based on an algorithm that's being trained, and there's a lot of intelligence there. One of them is called responsive resize. The other one is the repeat grid. We're always improving typography and layout capabilities. As I said, we have plugins for XD. XD will do, I would say, 80% of the functionality that designers need. But for the last 20%, you can always use plugins that are more specific to things. We have plugins that consume items from the internet, like a Google Sheet. We have other plugins that allow you to import GIFs, or plugins that allow you to export code if you want, like HTML and all that. And then recent functionality that we just released is the ability to edit things in Photoshop. So if you have a bitmap here in XD, you can right-click, edit in Photoshop, you open Photoshop, and then you can get that change in with no problems. So this is design mode in XD. The second mode in XD is prototype mode. So today, people that are not using XD, they have to do design in one tool, export, prototype in another tool, and validate in another tool. So that process takes a lot of time and energy. And in XD, you just move from design mode here to prototype mode with one click, and you can start prototyping right away. Then you can have very rich prototypes, not only transitions from one screen to another, but you can have animations within the same artboard. And more recently, you now can create prototypes based on voice. For example, you can talk to XD, XD can talk back to you. It's really, really interesting. You can prototype for voice-based scenarios. And you can also use gamepads to control prototypes in XD. So you can create a gamepad scenario for, let's say, an Xbox game or something like an Apple TV controller if you use another tool. And it also supports keyboard triggers. So you can type, and then based on what you type, you can do something specific. There are tons of tools out there that allow you to convert regular inputs like swipes or even camera. For example, I have an example here that I can show you on my Twitter that was done this past week in Brazil. So this guy is using his head to control a prototype in XD. And the way he's doing it, he's using another software to convert the head movements into keyboard inputs, and then XD can understand the keyboard inputs, and then you can do something magic like that in XD. All right, there's a lot of examples out there if you want to be inspired, especially on Behance. If you search for XD, there's a lot of things tagged with Adobe XD there and a lot of good inspiration. And the link is up here. All right, so let's jump into the demo. Cool. So here I am in design mode in XD. And let's say I'm designing this website. And what I want to do here is create more cards. I want to create horizontal cards. Of course, I can copy and paste like any other app. But then if I need to adjust padding, I need to remember how many times I hit shift. It's a little painful and not ideal. So thinking of that, we created this tool called Repeat Grid. So you select the element or elements you want to repeat. Then you click there on Repeat Grid, and you just repeat them visually. So you can do more here. And then if you need to adjust the padding, you just come here and you do it this way. You can also grow this vertically and get more cards vertically. And the grids are very smart. All the changes you make to one element here are reflected throughout the whole grid, but content can be unique. And you can play with that. One thing that can be helpful, and this is a good opportunity to show you plugins. Here I have a link to a spreadsheet, and I want to use the content that's in the spreadsheet, probably coming from a copywriter, to that grid element that I just created. So I have some columns, I have links to images and data here. I can copy that, go back to XD, select this grid, and here on the left you have the tools, you have your assets panel, your layers panel, and then on the far there you have your plugins panel. And there's a plugin here called Google Sheets that I really recommend. I can paste a public link, the one that I have in memory. And now the plugin will map the layer name in XD. So I named my elements, the layers are named based on these things. And then it's mapping that with the column name on the spreadsheet. I can change that if I want. I can randomize if I want. And then as soon as I hit apply, this will not only pull the text, but it will also download the images from those links that you saw. And then if for some reason my copywriter changes this, let's say now this is programming, I can select this, open that, and I can refresh the content. And now that change will be reflected here. I can also load CSVs if I want. I can load JSON with another plugin here called Data Populator. I can organize my artboards. I can look for icons, like I was saying. If I need to download that. But you see there's a lot of very smart plugins here to help you move fast.
And Damian, we have a question.
Yes, go
So,
ahead.
Shelly asked, is changing elements in a repeat grid new, or do you still need to make an element a component? Let me read that again. Is changing elements in a repeat grid new, or do you still need to make an element a component?
Yeah, so this is a good question. You can use the repeat grid functionality without touching components. Like they were called symbols, now components. But if you want to override something, and I'll talk about components in a second, then you can have components inside your grid. Then you can create specific overrides. For example, I can make sure the whole set of stars here is a component. So right click, let me select that again. Right click, make component. Now every single card here in the grid has a component. And based on that, because it's a component, I can do overrides for components. In this case, I can override just the color here on this one. So that way I'm overriding just within the component. And structure changes that I make to elements here will be reflected everywhere. I don't know if that answers the question, but I don't want to get it into like too much details before I show you components, and it'll make more sense.
Nope, that makes sense. Thanks for answering that.
Perfect. Wonderful. The other thing that I'd like to show you here is XD has shapes. So I was saying it's based on vectors. And let's try to get an image here. So anytime you have an image, if I can get that, copy my face. Let's say I have this in memory now. I can come here to the shape, right click, paste appearance. Now this is the fill of this shape. If I change this, what's inside never gets distorted because it's the fill. And the functionality that I was telling you is I can right click there and say edit in Photoshop. This will open this image in Photoshop. I can apply, for example, a grayscale, save and close, and that will update here. All right, moving forward. Another problem that we see designers having every day is resizing elements from, let's say they do a design for mobile and they need to recreate the whole thing for tablet or desktop. So they need to move things, they need to resize things, and that process takes a lot of time. If you do that in Photoshop, it's very, very painful and hard, like very manual. If you use tools like Sketch or Figma, they help you, but you have to spend a lot of time defining constraints. Oh, this needs to stay on this side as I resize, or this thing needs to stay fixed. Very time consuming. So looking at that challenge, we thought we could do something better. For over a year, we worked on looking at probably more than 1,000 real files, and based on positioning, based on grouping, hierarchy, we trained an algorithm to kind of do 80% of the job for you. So for example, this is an element that has a lot of different elements inside. This one has like rounded corners, and they are grouped, but no symbols, nothing. It would work with symbols, but this is just a set of elements that are grouped together. If I copy this mobile version, and now I need to select, let's select this one, hold shift, select the other one. I have two artboards selected, and I want to create the tablet version and the web version. I can then paste, Command V, and with the algorithm running for responsive resize, this is the default behavior. I just resize, and the algorithm will see, okay, these guys are grouped, they're on the left. Chances are it needs to stay on the left. I can also use the properties inspector here to change the size, and you can see very easily I can do that. I can adjust, for example, a design that was made for mobile to now be a tablet version, and it's full of elements inside. But then let's say I want to change what's happening. Let's say I want to make this bigger vertically, but I want these guys enable smart filters and this copy down here to stay fixed to the top. I don't want them to move down as I scroll, as I grow. So again, XD will do 80% of the job, but I can go inside, double click to go inside, and instead of doing this automatically, I can go to manual mode and tell it to stay fixed to the top. Everything else was added by the algorithm, but I can always go there and change the 20% that I want to. Perfect. I'm a little concerned with my power here, but let's hope it lasts. Cool. Another thing here, let's say I want to resize these guys. Imagine doing that in Photoshop, it would take forever. Um, this is another example that you do, it does 80%, but then you can finish the other 20 there. This is XD inside XD, and I will show you like pretty much all the apps at Adobe now are designed in XD, and if you resize, you will do the magic to keep things intact. For example, if you need to resize these elements, because they have so many different elements, things normally would get super distorted, but with responsive resize running, everything is preserved. And again, if you need to change something, you can do that with the manual mode. So let's say I want to apply these 3 elements into this smaller version here. I just do that based on grouping and all that. This is a horizontal scenario. You can see I can do that there. And the last thing I want to show you about responsive resize, let's say I have this mobile version and I want to duplicate Command D and I want to create a tablet version or a website version of the same thing. I can then just double check. This will stay loose and fixed width. So if I resize the artboard, this will stay in the center. And because this is a repeat grid, I can do it this way. I can see it's not stretching the cards, but this is creating new columns because this is a repeat grid. Perfect. Any questions so far?
None in the chat box.
Perfect. Before I show you components, let's talk about prototyping quickly because I think it's more powerful for now. And then if my battery lasts, we can talk about components. Cool. All right, let's do this. Let's say you're here in this wireframe that you designed a set of wireframes, and you want to create some basic interactions. So the first thing you can do is, like I said, just click here into prototype mode. I'll keep the play button there open. And let's select this artboard first, play. It's a smaller version, perfect. And what I want is, as soon as my user taps on this button, I want to go to this artboard. So click there and drag a wire to the second artboard. This will be a transition based on tap and slide left. So as soon as I do that, that interaction is running. And if I have my phone connected, I have a link here that I can show you. If you have your phone connected via USB, it could be Android or iOS, all the changes that are reflected there are reflected in real time in your Adobe XD app for iOS or Android. And as soon as you unplug the phone, that content, it could be just the designer, it could be the working prototype, stays cached, and then you can do user testing, you can present from your phone or tablet. Just download the Adobe XD app on iOS or Android, and you can do that. Perfect. The next thing I want to do is, as soon as my user taps on this button, I want to show the keyboard, but instead of being a transition to that artboard, I want this artboard to show up on top of this one as an overlay. So the way you do that, it'll be a tap, but instead of transition, this will be an overlay. And you can see I get that green decoration. I can move where it shows up from, and then I can change this to slide up, starting from the bottom. And that's it. Now I have that functionality. I tap, I get that. I tap, I get that. One thing you can do as you present your work, with the preview window open, you can click there on the recording button. Now it's recording everything I do, including my voice if I want. I'm clicking there and blah, blah. And then when you click there again, then you get an MP4 to share a video with your voiceover to explain what's going on. Another scenario here, let's say I want to have a scrolling functionality, but I want this rectangle to stay fixed to the bottom. What I can do is I select that, and on the properties inspector inside prototype mode, I tell it to stay fixed as I scroll, and that's it. Now it's fixed. So with fixed elements, you can do very interesting things. For example, you can do this basic one, which is just fixing that. But if you have more than one element fixed, you can see I can get transparency and all they all stay fixed. Pretty powerful. And in this scenario here, I'll tell this to stay fixed. This white rectangle here has background blur applied to it. You can see it's right there, meaning that anything that goes underneath will be blurry, will get blurry. And iOS does a lot of that. And you don't have to fix elements at the top in front of everything. You can always fix elements in the back. And you can see that there. So I have some elements that are fixed, but they're behind other elements. They can create nice, almost like parallax effects. Nice. So that's fixed elements. In terms of overlays, a couple things you can do here. Let's say I'm here. I want to create an overlay to that guy, and this would be slide right. And that's it. So now if I test this, I can not only see the overlay, but that overlay is longer, higher, so I can have some scrolling there as well. So this is overlays and fixed elements in XD. Another thing that we have is the ability to animate elements within the same artboard. So let's start from scratch here. So let's say I want to create a scenario. I just created a new artboard using the artboard tool here. And what I want here is I want to have a button there. Do like an orange or yellow like that. No border. What I want is, as soon as I tap here, I want this to grow and occupy the entire screen. So the way you do that, you duplicate this. So I'll duplicate, Command D, or copy and paste. And I will make this second artboard very big, so it's occupying the entire screen. Then I jump into prototype mode. I say whenever I tap here, I want to go here. It's not going to be an overlay. It's going to be auto animate, not transition, not overlay, auto animate. And then XD will do that both ways. So I just did that to the beginning. And as soon as I do that, now that transition is happening within the same artboard with just two artboards to create that. But with that, you can create scenarios like this one. So this guy has opacity 100%. Here is like 50. Here's 50. Here's 100. This bar is on the right here. This bar is on the left here. And here I have two columns all the way to the right. And on the other artboard, I have two columns all the way to the left. And now with tap and auto animate, I can create this scenario. And this is very smooth. I don't know if it's coming across well, but it's very smooth. And also works on mobile. Another kind of trigger that you can have, not only tap, is drag. So on this guys, on the columns themselves, I added drag as a trigger, as you can see there. And now you can not only use the tap up there, but you can also click and drag the one on the bottom to go from one, let's call it state, to another. I can distort elements, so this rectangle grows to become this other rectangle, and other elements move. So as long as you have the layer name the same, for example, here I have this rectangle. If you open the layer name, you see it's called rectangle 8. And here, this other rectangle is also called rectangle 8. So as long as your vectors, they have the same layer name, if they're different vectors, XD will morph them to go from one scenario to another. There's another kind of trigger that we have called time for artboards. So this is something that I tap, and then I land on this artboard. But as soon as I land here, I want to start showing this blue bar for loading, to just pretend this is loading. And what I did is at the artboard level, the trigger here is time. Again, it could be tap, it could be drag, it could be voice, keys, the keyboard keys, and the gamepad, but we're using time. So as soon as I land here, it would jump to this other artboard. I can set the duration, and I can even create some delay if I want. And then it jumps to this one, it reveals the blue bar, and then when this is over, it jumps to this one and reveals this blue bar. So let's see that in action. So I click, revealing the blue bar, and that. I can also use time to go from one artboard to another, and the property that's changing here is rotation from 0 to 360, so I can use time and no easing, so it stays linear. And you can be creative with drag, like in this case. I can click and drag there, just 2 artboards. And the way this is done is via mask. So here I have a small rectangle and 2 elements within a mask, night and day. Now here I only can see night, and on the other one I move them up within the mask. So, and I also have this blue sky on this one that doesn't exist here, so it shows this and hides this, shows this and hides. And the last thing, maybe in Auto Animate, I can use responsive resize in Auto Animate to create something like that. Any questions so far on Auto Animate? No? Okay. This is another scenario where this is a game that we're trying to build, just like the prototype for the game. And I don't have an Xbox controller here set up right now, but if the way this is done, you select keys and gamepad, and then you put your cursor here, and you press the button, and then XD will read that input, and okay, whenever I type X, you will go there. At the same time, you can always use voice. So let's change that from gamepad to voice, and I can say start game. That's my command. Let's try that. Start game. Then XD listens to it. You can even play it back. So let me show you the playback functionality. So I have that there. Let's do time. So as soon as I land on the second artboard, I'm using time. And let's do speech playback. And I can say game started. So let me remove my headphones just for a second, so that you can see what's going on here. So I run the prototype, I press the space bar to say a command, start game.
Game started.
All right, so that's it. Back there. Voice, and you can change if it's female or male, saying things back to you. And this is there in XD. And the last thing I want to show you is this other mode in XD called share, where whenever I want, I can share a link with a stakeholder. So let's say I have this simple prototype here. I have a website with fixed elements, some transitions, and I want to export this for stakeholders or developers. Let's do developers. So I select the initial artboard there, share for development. I can create a link. Let's do that. It has 2 assets that are marked. I can create a link. So now all the necessary assets are being uploaded to Creative Cloud. And then any developer that has access to this link, and the link could be public, it could be private, meaning that you have to invite people via email, or it could be password protected, public but password protected. And I can open this link in the browser, and now anyone who has access to this link doesn't have to have XD installed. It's running in the browser. And once it's there, minimize this. It's going to load that. And I can see this in full screen if I want to. So let's wait for it to load. I can play with that same interaction that we had, or here. I can hit escape to exit full screen mode. I can get comments from stakeholders and developers. Change this. XD allows you to design, prototype, and then share to get feedback and iterate. So that's all I wanted to show. And if you guys have questions, I can answer now.